Hey guys, welcome back for another thought for the day. So we are on part 10. Yes, part 10 of O.I.L from The Last Dance. We have made it to the end. And as we make it to the end, today we're going to talk about next up. And so next up comes from us continuously and constantly talking about how Michael Jordan is the GOAT, the greatest of all times. And that's important because he has set a standard in basketball, and I'm not going to say he's the end-all be-all standard of basketball. We know that Will Chamberlain, that Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Kadeem Abdul-Jabbar, and many others have set standards, right, for basketball and how we play basketball. And in that thought, in that frame of reference, it's important for us to remember that just because there has been a standard set, we have to consider next up. So who's the next up? What's next up? And that is really honing in on legacy. Like, how are we creating legacy? And a lot of times when we think about Michael Jordan being the GOAT, Kobe Bryant and LeBron James comes to mind as the follow-ups to Michael Jordan. And that's really important because when you look at Kobe Bryant in the documentary, you hear him talk about all of what you see in him is what, like a lot of what you see in him has been given or deposited by Michael Jordan. Like some of that stuff he's gotten from conversations with Michael Jordan. And so it's important for us to think next up. Like, so what's next up? And how are we preparing for the next up? And so in that frame of reference, the scripture that stuck out for me that was really important as a foundation for this concept of preparing or thinking about or handing over our platforms to the next generation was through the relationship of Elijah the prophet to Elisha the prophet, right? And so I'm gonna read 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 11 through 14, and I'm going to read the New Living Translation. And it says, as they were walking along and talking, suddenly a chariot of fire appeared, drawn by horses of fire. It drove between the two men, separating them, and Elijah was carried by a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha saw it and cried out, my father, I see the chariots and charioteers of Israel. And as they disappeared from sight, Elisha tore his clothes in distress. Elisha picked up Elijah's cloak which had fallen when he was taken up. Then Elisha returned to the bank of the Jordan River. He struck the water with Elijah's cloak and cried out, where is the Lord, the God of Elijah? Then the river divided and Elisha went across. So those 4 verses are heavy. There's a lot in them. I'm not even going to attempt to try to do a Bible study about transferring and moving from mentor to mentee because it's weighted and it's heavy. I'll probably write something about it. But what I do want to make clear is that we have to turn over our mantles. And so mantles is the word that is used or translated when you see cloak. And it basically, a mantle is a demonstration of your preeminence or your authority. It's an outward demonstration, a declaration of power and authority. And so in this, we see the outward demonstration of power, the outward demonstration of God's authority and power transfer over from Elijah to Elisha. And that's deep, it's weighted, it's heavy. I don't even know if I can really pull that apart. But what I want to be clear is that we have to begin to set our future up for the next, right? So who's next up? And we know, and I really want to be clear about this because I did a quick little study. Kobe Bryant and LeBron James in their own rights are GOATs, right? Their numbers are very similar in some natures to Michael Jordan's. In some natures, I'm not saying that they're equal, but they are very similar in that you see these men coming up in weight. And in them coming up in weight, you see them in their work pushing what Michael Jordan did a little bit farther, right? So you see LeBron James using his platform while being a basketball player, while being an active basketball player, to sit and call for change, while in the work, and not just being about his brand, but also being about creating future. So the person that we're setting up for next should be building and going a little farther than what we did. And we know that when we look at David and Solomon. So when you look at David and Solomon, and take a moment in your own time to read First Chronicles chapter 22, where David is on his deathbed and he's handing over the kingdom to Solomon. And he says to Solomon, I fought so that we could have this space, so that we could have this land, so that we could be an established kingdom. And I've got blood on my hands. And even though I have blood on my hands, the thing that I want to see happen next, the thing that I want to make sure is established, is that we create a temple for God, right? And in that, in turning it over and in handing over to the next, what he did was, later on as you read through the chapter, you see that he set Solomon up to complete the task. So are you setting people up? Are you setting your next up so that they can accomplish tasks? And I would say that Jordan did that. Jordan created a lane and a vein for basketball players to knock down doors, for their names to be household names, and to do things, for them to be able to be a household name and then push forward to cause for radical change on the court and off of the court. I believe that. You don't have to agree with it, but I do really think that Jordan gets the blood on his hands, right? And the blood that he gets on his hands is able to set the standard for Kobe to do greatness, for LeBron James to do greatness, and for whoever the child is that's going to come after them, right? To transform things. And so in that, I think there are 3 questions that we got to ask ourselves when we think about next up. And the first is, are you making room for the next, right? Like, it's great for us to work on ourselves and to be great in ourselves, but what if when Kobe asked Michael Jordan the question about how to do a pivot move, if he ignored him, right? We wouldn't probably see the greatness that came out of Kobe. And I want to assume in my assumptive mind that Kobe has had those same level of conversations with LeBron James. So there is the importance for us to consider, how are we setting up the next, right? And for us to really do that. And are you pouring into tomorrow, right? And so pouring into tomorrow can look a lot of different ways. It can be giving, it can be actively volunteering, it can be voting, right? Because that pours into tomorrow. But there's so many things that we can do that will pour into tomorrow, that will pour into those that are coming next behind us. And we really need to make an effort to ask ourselves, how am I pouring into tomorrow? And then the last question I want to ask is, are you keeping someone from from not being next? And you got to ask yourself that. Are you keeping someone from not being next? Are you keeping all the information to yourself? Are you choosing that when a question is asked, when you can mentor someone, if it be for a day or if it be for years, are you choosing to sit and say, nah, I don't want to be involved in that? And that's really important, because there will be no next. There will be no legacy. There will be no continuing of the greatness that is established if we don't continue to pour into what's happening. Consider Phil Jackson. He was a championship player in his own right. He comes and he pours into Jordan and reframes his mind so that Jordan can continue or be what's next, right? So consider those things, consider what it is, but know that next is up and we need to begin to prepare for what's next.